Welcome to Building the Future. I'm your host, Kevin Horick. You can check out new episodes of the show every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m. If you missed an episode or want to get more information about the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Jess Jacobs. She's an actress, producer, and advocate. Jess, welcome to the show.
Hello, Kevin. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. You're doing a bunch of things in a bunch of kind of innovative spaces, but maybe before we kind of get into that, let's get to know you a little bit better and kind of start off with where you grew up.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born in San Diego, California, which, by the way, I just didn't know how beautiful of a place San Diego is until I left it.
Sure.
Sort of like one of those things that I lived in a bubble. I was like, oh, right, of course, this is my home. And then I brought some friends back there during college, and they were like, you grew up here? Get out. So totally recognize how lucky I am. And it's a beautiful place.
Yeah, I love that area.
Right, it's gorgeous. I moved to New York for college when I was 18. I went to NYU, and I started in the acting department. I had wanted to go into acting professionally since I was 15. I booked my first job in San Diego doing some professional theater there, and got my first paycheck. And my friends were scooping, ice cream at Baskin Robbins, and I was on stage.
That's
and
awesome.
So sort of the bug bit me. I came out here to do the theater conservatory. And after my first year was not super happy, and I think that I was really ready to enter the world.
Okay.
So I ended up getting my degree in art history, stayed at NYU, but left the acting program and started working professionally in the city.
Okay.
I graduated and moved out to LA, where I did a bit of film and TV work and was loving my life out there, and was called back to New York in 2015 by my reps. Moved back here and have sort of been building this life out here, as not a college student anymore, and really sort of starting to situate myself in the world and figuring out exactly what it is that I'd like to contribute.
Sure. No, I think that's great. I love that kind of you pick something and then you try it and you're like, well, maybe I want to try something different. But I'm kind of curious to know what made you switch to art history, because I find it fascinating personally, and I took some art history classes as well, but I'm always curious what made you kind of go into that.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I was a really little girl, my grandmother used to take me to the museum and would use ice cream as a gift. It was like, oh, if you want a scoop of ice cream, we got to go to the art museum first. And it was like, okay. And she would sort of drag me there. And after a couple of years, I don't know if she was doing it on purpose or what, but it totally worked. And I have been very, very excited by the art world. I think having the understanding of a culture and of a movement based on the visual representation and the ways in which things are changing through the eyes of an artist, it's a very interesting way into to history for me. And I think, as a content creator now, I'm really realizing that the kind of art that is made is such a deep reflection of the way that people are talking on the ground, the way that things are happening politically. If you look at the abstract expressionist movement after World War II, or during and after World War II, it showed that people were no longer able to feel that they were getting to express themselves and their anger and their frustration and their fear through a more naturalistic kind of thing. It was Impressionism before, but it stopped being picture related and started being more emotion related. And I think that's such a good reflection of the way that people were feeling during World War II, for example.
Sure. No, I love that. That's cool. So you're doing a bunch of stuff in the kind of nonprofit space. You founded a kind of company. Kind of walk me through, why did you kind of decide to start kind of a company and work in the nonprofit space?
Yeah. So, when I moved back to New York, I was, and I mean, I still am, but was like really at that time sort of at the top of my game as far as what I thought that I wanted. So, I'd been fighting for this career in the entertainment industry, and I had reps that were really pushing me and getting me out for really great stuff. And I was finding myself not super happy. And I wasn't really sure why that was. It sort of was like, but this is everything you've ever wanted. And that was right around the time that Bernie and Hillary were, fighting it out for the nomination.
Sure.
And I remember when she won, and she was scheduled to give the speech that night, and I was, pleased. I like her. I supported her for a lot of reasons, and I don't expect everybody to, agree with them. Everybody has their own political views, but I was very excited by the fact that she had won.
Sure.
And so I was looking forward to the speech, but in a kind of casual way, And so that night, my roommate at the time and I sat up on the couch, and we turned on the TV, and Hillary stepped out onto the stage, and I burst into tears. And I just really couldn't have anticipated that. That seeing her standing up there and accepting the nomination as the first woman for the president of the United States of America, it was just, in that moment, I think that really emotional response that I had helped me realize how crucial it is for every person, man, woman, child of every color, religion, creed, to see somebody with whom they identify in a position of leadership,
Sure.
for having the opportunities to succeed, for being recognized for their accomplishments. And it struck me that I was working within an industry that doesn't always do the best job of representing human beings in their authenticity.
Interesting.
And so I had the sort of impulse to start producing content which did that. And I happened to have met an incredible producer named Audrey Rosenberg, who is now my producing and business partner.
Nice.
She's been in the industry for 18 years, I think.
Oh, wow.
Been doing independent film, TV, doc producing. She's absolutely brilliant. And we clicked right away. I mean, we had this sort of similar mission. We were looking to work together on a project-by-project basis, and it became super clear pretty quickly that we really were aligned in a lot of other spaces as well, in a lot of our beliefs and a lot of the potential that we saw for media to make a difference. And so we decided, I think it was December, we had a meeting, which we call our I Like You meeting, in which we both sat down and had a conversation in which we were just effusive about how much we cared about each other and how much we liked working together, how much we wanted to build something together. And that was sort of the start of it. And then
That's great.
Since then, we've been in the formation process and really developing our slate. We have a couple of really exciting projects that we're looking forward to. And I think also really important to note that there was an alignment between Audrey and myself, which recognized the importance of work in the nonprofit sector and how, non-government organizations and work with these kind of social justice organizations and programs, how it really can be collaborative with the entertainment industry and how it doesn't have to be so segmented. And I think it is a little bit that way right now.
Okay. No, that's interesting. So before we kind of get into maybe the nonprofit stuff, because I get that they're kind of almost one and the same sometimes, or there's some overlap. But what exactly is the company, and what are you guys doing with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a New York-based female-founded production company.
Okay.
We are creating film, TV, and digital content, and we're doing a little bit of work in the documentary space, but that's not our emphasis.
Okay.
And we are focusing on stories not normally represented in dominant culture.
Okay.
And what that really means for us is that there are stories for and by people represented in the stories themselves. So we call it our inclusive development process.
Okay.
Which is to say that any person or community which is being portrayed in character or in context in any story will be a part of the process of creating the story itself, so that we are really representing people in their full experience of the world.
No, that's great.
So
What's the company's called? Sorry, I don't think you mentioned that.
Sure. So we're called Invisible Pictures.
Okay.
The name is, we're sort of playing on the paradox. And it is this sort of idea that female power is this kind of invisible force that a lot of ways in which it talks about are like, you really notice it when it's missing.
Sure.
that there's a compassionate quality to it, a gentle quality to it. It's very powerful. It's not to say that invisibility means that it's not seen, like that, or that we don't need it, or that it's smaller, but that it really is. It kind of is a calling to how powerful women have been, not have been told not to shine, I think, by a lot of the structures and institutions that have been in place for a long time. And we're really excited about the opportunity to sort of disrupt that.
No, I think that's great. So you have some kind of projects in the works. Do you kind of want to elaborate on some of them, or is they still kind of a little hush hush?
They are very hush hush, but
Okay.
I can be broad, and,
Okay.
and I would be very happy to do that. I mean, I think we have a TV show that's in the works, which we have a director who's never directed for TV before, who's a big guy in the space. So we're really looking forward to working with him and really being able to bring something exciting and new from a structural and content perspective for to his over. And we have a couple of films, all of which are dealing, at least 3 of them that we're really in the process of putting together in a very serious way, which all have female leads, which are all women that we don't often see in positions of, the leading woman. It's sort of a non-traditional approach to storytelling in that way. And a lot of it is recontextualizing the American expectation for what our media normally looks like.
Sure. Okay.
So that is to say that, that they are characters which are leading and revealing and offering a new perspective on some of the issues that we're dealing with in the country and in the world today. I think there's definitely an international appeal that I see our company having.
Sure. No, I think that's great, and I love that. But I'm curious to know why New York over LA to start kind of a production company. Like, was there like a big, is one better than the other, or you just picked New York, or kind of what was the reasoning behind kind of founding it there?
Everybody asks us that, and everybody in LA is totally perplexed as to how we expect to operate out of New York City. And I think on one hand, there's a little bit of that intrigue.
Okay.
People are like, how are you doing that? So it is sort of a hook in a way.
Interesting.
And I think that the other side of it is that it puts us, we're close to Europe, we're close to DC. I think that it gives us a bit of a global awareness. I spent a lot of time living in LA, and I love it. Obviously, I'm from Southern California. I totally am all about the West Coast vibe. And I think that there's a way in which the entertainment industry is really so deeply entrenched in Los Angeles culture that what we're trying to do in sort of like turning something on its head a little bit and being a little bit disruptive in a very respectful way,
Sure.
and also just questioning the norms and questioning the expectations, that being in a city where, everybody in New York has a job. It's not this kind of
Sure.
like, how are you involved in the entertainment industry? It's like, oh, you're in the entertainment industry. Cool. I'm a banker.
Got you.
Or, oh, cool. I'm in education. Or, it's a very integrated part of society here. And I think that we really like that. And we also are excited about the opportunity to collaborate cross industry. So it's really fun here to be able to work with, like I said, nonprofits. Also, we're talking right now to an organization to create an educational product in VR possibly for them. And so, we're doing education, we're in tech, we're in media and entertainment, we're in, it's just, we get to work in a lot of different spaces. And I think that that's really exciting for us.
No, that makes sense. I'm always kind of curious. And I know like LA has a good tech scene, but so does New York, right?
Mm-hmm.
And kind of, it's just different, right? No, that's interesting. I'm always kind of curious, more for my own self-curiosity, I think. But
Sure.
So you're also playing in the not-for-profit space, and you're involved in a few. Can you maybe kind of cover exactly what you're doing in that space as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that the project that I'm most excited about and that I'm working on, I think, the most heavily right now, is a project with the Maverick Collective, which is it's an organization under the umbrella of PSI, which is Population Services International. It's an NGO that operates out of DC and works in, I believe it's 67 countries around the world. They have field offices. The Maverick Collective was co-founded by Melinda Gates and Mette Marit, the Crown Princess of Norway.
That's cool.
And a woman named Kate Roberts, who is the VP at PSI. And what they were really looking to do was to offer a space for women to come and to use funding and to use skills to develop a project that maybe is a little bit riskier, that somebody like, a traditional donor like USAID would not be as interested in funding, because they want to see more of a return. They're more risk averse, I suppose.
Okay.
And so being able to bring in women who have a certain skill set, who are able to sort of think differently about the issues that are presenting some of the countries in which PSI works, is part of the reason why the Maverick Collective was started, and it's certainly the reason why I was excited by the opportunity. So I'm working on a project right now, co-designing a space for adolescent girls aged 14 to 24 in Côte d'Ivoire. Okay. So we'll be working in Abidjan, which is the capital. And after the Civil War, there was a huge issue with reproductive health access for young people. The maternal mortality rate spiked. And we saw a lot of opportunity to go in and really rebuild some of the clinics and some of the spaces for women to come together. And I think also dealing with the fact that there is such a high cellular penetration rate, which basically means that there are cell phones everywhere.
Sure.
And so young girls of that age are as far away from their mothers technologically as we were or are from our great-grandmothers.
Interesting.
So there is this sort of sense that they have access to information, but they don't know how to filter it. Their mothers are having a hard time sort of articulating that and figuring out how to maintain traditional values with all of this access that's happening. And so what we're really hoping to do, and we're very much in the project design phase right now. So I'm going out to Côte d'Ivoire in October. We'll sit down with a bunch of girls. We're using a human-centered design approach, which basically is actually very similar to my production company's inclusive development process, which is to say that the girls that will be served by this program are going to be a part of the design process of the program itself.
Oh, very cool.
So we'll go out there and start that process. But what we're hoping to be able to provide is a space for them to develop aspirational thinking, so that when they have sex, they don't think of it as a transactional thing, but they can think about how their sexual and reproductive health and activity fits into their greater goals for their lives.
Sure.
And then to create a sort of network of these young girls so that they have people to talk to, so that they have a community, that they don't feel that they're being stifled by, mothers or grandmothers. And also to have an educational component, so that they have information that is accurate and not necessarily, it's just kind of thing like when we go and Google, I have my left ankle aches and
Sure.
WebMD says you have cancer. It's like this kind of thing.
Yep.
And so, really giving them accurate information. And then also there is a project that's being funded right now by the Dutch government that's a concurrent project, which is staffing out clinics and really making sure that they have all of the highest health technologies for these girls and women. And so working with them to do some clinic referrals to make sure that the girls are going to youth-friendly clinics where they're not being told, what they should do with their bodies based on a set of biases that are held by the clinic, the folks who run the clinics. So that's the goal. And stay tuned, because as we develop some of this stuff, I think there will be a lot of insights that I'm also able to bring back to the States.
Sure.
And that I'm really interested in from an advocacy perspective, and starting to think about young women and sexual health.
Sure. No, I think that's great. And the other thing too, that I think just even getting people to talk about what's similar and different between kind of North America and the rest of the world, right? Because as we become more and more of like a global economy, and a lot of people I have on the show are kind of a little bit more on the tech space, and I like having people like yourself that, do tech in certain projects if it's needed, but also to get people to think about kind of people outside of kind of their, area or North America. And you brought up something that I think some people don't think about all the time, is like just how people access information in the internet. Like, if the only way, like, there's certain people on the planet that will only ever see the internet on a phone, right? And a crappy phone, right? It's not the nice like $1,200 iPhone that some of us buy new every year, right? Like, and like I kind of say it jokingly, but I don't mean it. Like, I think just getting people to think about these challenges kind of globally, right? Whether it's something as serious as kind of, women's health, or just the health of people, or, just kind of how they access information, getting them the proper information. I think that stuff's super important, right? And being able to kind of have people like yourself on the show to help promote that and get people thinking about that is super important, or at least in my opinion, it's super important.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that, too, there's an opportunity sort of to meld these two things that you're talking about as far as digital content is concerned. Because a lot of people are starting to think, in the very traditional, entertainment space, are starting to think about ways to create content which is short form, so it's, easily consumable, sort of bite-sized, and is distributable in sort of multiple platforms, that it's shareable on social media, that it lives on a website which is accessible by phone, that the production value and the amount of money, at least right now, I think that this will probably change as things go on. And I know that there are some really powerful and interesting people in this space that are looking to really take TV quality and put it in digital. But right now, it's a little bit cheaper because you're not watching it on a big screen with a big fancy sound system. You're watching it on your phone, exactly what you're talking about, and maybe a crappy phone at that, like you said. And to really have content where the messaging is dealt with responsibly.
Sure.
Because if people across the world are watching, whatever's on YouTube, or YouTube Red, there's Go 90, there's Refinery 29. There's so many different people working in the space that are starting studios and creating this kind of content. That stuff will become a part of the sort of conversation that we're having socially, politically, globally about different issues, whether or not it's issue-based content.
Sure.
Because the people that are represented in these kinds of shows and series are internalized, I think, by the audiences, especially because we're so used to sort of seeing both reality style, non-scripted content on our phones, especially on Facebook. And as Facebook launches their original series platform, Watch, I think that's going to be, I'm very excited to see where that goes. But, I'm very excited about the potential for digital media to really spread awareness about different kinds of points of view, a different perspective, to really create a global community online through the accurate representation of people that are unlike oneself, or from a different country, or, a different sort of background.
Sure. No, I love that. And the thing that always kind of shocked me within the last, I think, year or so, I can't remember, somebody was telling me that, like, their kids that were kind of, I think, like, maybe around 10-ish or 13, something like that, like kind of that, like, young, like almost like preteen, whatever, that they named some like famous, like A-list movie star, and their kids had no idea who they were, but you named like some sort of YouTube celebrity that I hadn't even heard of at the time. They were like, well, that person's like famous, right? And this other person who's been in like blockbuster A-list type movies for decades, never even heard of, right? But I think the point I'm trying to get across is what I found fascinating about that is you can create this content online, and I think younger generations might never even see kind of like a Hollywood blockbuster or something like that, where you have these people online that they like trust and can get kind of good content from, whether it's for entertainment or learning or kind of both online. Like, I think we're at the kind of beginning of that, right? And I, like you mentioned, there's companies out there doing it, but I think we're kind of at the beginning of that. And so I love kind of that you guys are playing in that space and, are going to be creating content in this space. I love that.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's there's two things sort of about what you're saying that are really interesting to me. One is from an entertainment perspective, the turnaround for short form content and content on digital is so much quicker.
Yeah.
So you can be really responsive. There's all these shows on YouTube that are like, after Game of Thrones gets, finishes, like 2 hours later, there's a response show up, and I forget the names of the guys. There was just a New York Times article about them, how they've created this empire, basically responding to TV shows on YouTube, and that the viewership sometimes for those shows is higher than for Game of Thrones, which I think is hilarious and so fascinating.
Totally.
And I think that the other thing that's really sort of illuminating about what you're saying is that I think that if you asked any young kid who is Wonder Woman, they would know. If you asked any young kid who is Gal Gadot, they would say, or Gadot, I actually don't know how you say her last name, which is a little embarrassing, but they'd say, I don't know who that is.
Yep.
And that to me is fascinating, because you have a time where, we always used to think of celebrity culture and Hollywood culture as sort of intertwined.
Yep.
And I think that Hollywood now is becoming really a storytelling mechanism and less of a star-making mechanism.
Totally.
And that the digital space is really star-making, and maybe in TV a little bit still, but not really network so much. And there's been a lot of conversation recently, which, I don't really have an official point of view on, but about, whether cable is becoming obsolete or not, and how it's going to be able to compete with streaming services and digital services. And so I think we're starting to see, again, to talk about responsibility, these, young people that are making a lot of content and that are being, really focused in the space, starting to think about the ways in which their stories and their reach is impactful on this sort of celebrity scale in this really like role model kind of way.
Totally. Yeah, it is fascinating to me because like I'm 34, so I'm kind of like I'm like a millennial, but like just a millennial. So I kind of some of this millennial stuff I'm just like I don't understand, but then there's other parts of it I do. But the thing that I find kind of interesting, and to your point a second ago, is like I still kind of remember pre-internet. And obviously I work online, so I remember kind of both. So it's interesting to watch the kind of dynamic between the two, and to your point a second ago about like kind of cable companies, like where they're going to fit or not fit. And it's interesting because I don't know if you're familiar, but like with YouTube TV, where it's like their YouTube's like streaming live TV service and like
YouTube
PVR.
Red.
Yeah, well, no, they have another one called YouTube TV too, which includes YouTube Red. Oh, great. But it's like live streaming TV, and it's only in like 12 cities or something in America. But what I really like about it is you have access to the YouTube Red content, you have access to live content, you have access to kind of the old or like old shows. Like the seasons, they have pretty much the whole season, or past seasons. And then you also have kind of, you can search and then it will show you like YouTube stuff as well. And then it's like a PVR in the cloud. So you kind of have almost the best of kind of a bunch of the worlds coming together. And it's only been, I think it launched in like March or April of this year. So it's still like pretty new, and they're still kind of, I think there's only like 50 stations or something like that, which is still pretty good. But it's interesting to see the colliding of kind of the two spaces in kind of one interface. And so I think just being able to find content in almost like one interface or online is always kind of interesting to me, because I could watch almost like, say, a big Hollywood blockbuster or a big kind of primetime TV show, and then right after that I can watch kind of like a show that maybe like my neighbor made on YouTube, and I have no idea he's my neighbor, right? And just how it doesn't really matter, right, where the content's created.
There's no distinction necessarily.
Exactly. And like I look at my two kids, when they're older, they're not going to know, right? Like whether something costs millions of dollars or some guy shot that with his phone, right?
Right. I mean, if the content is interesting and entertaining enough, it doesn't seem to matter terribly much.
Yeah.
Especially for the generation, I guess, after, I just read something recently, I can't remember the name of it, but it's like after 95, there's like this 95 to 2000, and they're calling it this, they're sort of segmenting that population as a generation, because it's the first generation to have ever grown up with without ever remembering a time without cell phones.
Totally.
And I think when you have those, my brother was born in 1995. So, as he grows up and as he starts to really enter the world as a real, career man and all of this stuff, that's going to be his sensibility.
Totally.
And I think that it's, as a content creator, thinking about my audience first is I think the takeaway from what you're saying.
Yep.
That if I'm aware of who's watching, I can create content for them, and I can mold and shift my budgets and my stories and my stars, all of that stuff for my audience.
Totally. Well, and then
feels exciting.
And then you also have like a global audience, right? Because it's
100%.
It's obviously easier to get, I don't know, like hypothetically 1 million views when you're targeting the entire world than, maybe just like a small city or like even your state or whatnot, right? Like, so I think just people thinking kind of a bit bigger and creating content kind of for that kind of global kind of audience it kind of is intriguing to me. But I'm curious though to know your thoughts on, because obviously we've kind of covered this digital content space, but like how do you guys create content that's compelling and people want to watch? Like, is there kind of things that you're trying or what kind of tactics are you guys using when you're deciding what kind of content to actually create?
It's a really interesting question because I think as the space is changing, we are having to find ourselves being flexible and malleable and responding to the platforms themselves.
Okay.
I think it also is to say different studios want different things. So if we're going to somebody like a First Look Media, their platform is called Topic, and the kind of stuff that they're looking for is very different. It's a little bit more broad as far as who they're trying to appeal to, as opposed to like a Refinery 29, which is very female millennial focused. And so the kinds of stories that we take to those different platforms to pitch are very different. But I think that it piggybacks actually a little bit off of what you're saying about this global viewership, which is that there's less niched content now, I think.
Okay.
Anything that we're developing, so we're starting very specific, because I think that that's what makes a good story, is when you're starting with a character or you're starting with an incident that is specific and fleshed out and, like I said, whole and complete as far as, humanness is concerned, or the human experience of the event or whatever it is. But saying, what are like the bigger themes here, and how can we really think about tailoring the story to hold a lot in a short amount of time. And I do write a little bit, but I'm certainly more of an actress.
Sure.
And a creative producer than I am a writer. So I leave it to those brilliant minds to figure out exactly how that's done. But that's often the ask, is like, how can we take a specific story with a real human being and offer a greater sort of thought-provoking question in that storytelling.
Sure. No, that's interesting.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, totally. And I think like the other thing that just kind of got me thinking is like there's entire generations of people that are making a really, really good living just posting videos to YouTube, right? And so you guys are probably in a really kind of interesting time in history, because you could basically post your content to YouTube. You could probably get it on like actual kind of classic cable TV, and then probably post it on some other channels or maybe even in theaters if you shoot a movie, or at least some film festivals and such. But I think the fact that there's all these kind of different mediums, and you might even edit the content a bit different or in length based on kind of where you're posting it or kind of where you're showing the content. I think that's, to me at least, is kind of fascinating about where we are kind of in history and how you guys can kind of play with the content like that. Do you find that at least?
Yeah, I think, it's it's certainly a fun time to be doing this, and the reason, again, sort of almost to go back to the beginning, like why this whole business plan, where it was sparked from was this desire to really authenticate and to really sort of spread the skill of storytelling and development across multiple platforms and multiple mediums. And, as I'm thinking about, essentially what you're talking about, it sounds like is a distribution model.
Sure.
And how there's a lot of, I think this sort of idea of like throwing something up onto YouTube, and there are people that are making insane amounts of money.
Yeah, like millions of dollars a year.
Seriously making videos of themselves, like putting makeup on, and there's obviously a market for that. And I think that we're trying to capitalize on that sort of movement.
Okay.
And also maintain the integrity of a traditional storytelling structure.
Gotcha.
And so, a film that I'm in was accepted into a film festival. And so, we're planning to think about that and that release and the audience viewership for that. And that is like a very traditional, like red carpet into the theater, reviews, releasing it in, magazines. It's all of this kind of very standard stuff. Sure. And then on the other side of that, we had a development meeting earlier today about one of our digital series, which we're hoping will, serve sort of, it'll be a couple episodes. It will live on the web, and that we have the possibility to take it into traditional TV. Then we have another series which really exists exclusively online. We don't really see a life for it on cable or network, that we don't see a film version of it, that we don't really see it. There maybe are multiple seasons online, but it is very specifically a digital series. And so I think it really is, it's asking what the story needs and how to best tell it.
No, I love that. I think that's kind of great. And I'm curious though, do you find that it's maybe, or that maybe this is too general of a question, but that there's at least a lot of people that if it's coming from like a smaller, maybe independent kind of studio where it seems more authentic than if it's coming from kind of the, big kind of network or big kind of production company. Yeah. Like, do you think that's a fair statement? At least I think some people think that it's kind of more authentic.
We're thinking about that a lot, actually, and especially, again, being based in New York instead of in Los Angeles. It is a huge part of our conversations between, Audrey and myself. And I think that the way that I would answer that question is to say that the studios are huge institutions. Sure. They have been operating for a long time. There are a lot of, people that need to sign off and give the green light and jump through a hoop and all of this stuff. And so I think it's just a slower process by the system has been set up. And so this sort of, when I was talking earlier about, the internet being very reactive and having digital content really able to sort of be spit out within hours of something happening.
Sure.
And that it just speaks to how many people are in charge, and how many different levels of people need to okay something before there's money into it. And I think that it really is a money thing, right? Like if you're spending $100 million on a film, well, you're going to want to audience test it. You're going to want to make sure that, all of your stars have the right box office numbers. You're going to want to make sure that everybody's getting paid the right amount to be working on this kind of thing. Whereas in digital stuff, it's like people are paying, in some cases, like for very professional digital content, $5,000 a minute.
Yeah.
And if it's a 5-minute piece, it's like, that's a really short, or it's a really cheap episode.
Yeah. No,
and
fair.
You don't have to, I think, again, we're talking about risk aversion a little bit.
No, yeah, I think that's great. And it gets me kind of just thinking about this stuff, right? Because obviously, like, I'm a content creator myself, and I've noticed just even posting certain episodes or certain things on different kind of social media channels, the response can be like 180s from each other, and trying to figure out what works one place, doesn't work other places. And just for
Absolutely.
me, and for me at least, it's a bit of a struggle sometimes saying like, oh, is this going to work there? Or how do I tweak it to work there? Or, and it's probably obviously harder as you're putting out different things in kind of different verticals that maybe loosely tie together or maybe similar, but it gets a little bit more challenging when you're doing a product or a project about, say, I don't know, like women's health in another part of the world, or you're doing something maybe a little bit more entertainment focused, right? Putting those out on the same channel is probably
Exactly.
a bit of a struggle, right? Or at least to find both audiences.
No, I think that's right. I mean, I think it's a good metaphor, right? And there are people that are experts in social media, and it's not me, but it's sort of like, if you were to post a 140 character thought on Instagram, that's not going to have the same life as if you post an 140 character, well thought out, interesting thought on Twitter. Totally. It's just like what is required by the platform, and what are the best ways to get information out. And I think that that's something that definitely millennials and younger, and I would say that, I don't think that it's relegated exclusively to that population. I think that adults really, I mean, adults, that's a silly thing to say, but, that not the baby boomers and that whole, all those generations, that they understand that too, that it's such a part of our world now.
Yeah.
That there's almost like it's a very intuitive kind of thing. It's hard to articulate sometimes, but I think you're absolutely right.
No, that's great. But sadly, we're coming to the end of the show. So maybe let's close with mentioning where people can get more information about yourself and any of the projects that you're involved in and want to mention.
Absolutely. So we'll be launching my website soon, but you can find me at www.jessjacobs.com. And on Instagram, I'm at JessJacobsX, and the same on Twitter.
Perfect. Well, Jess, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks so much, Kevin. It's been a blast.
Thanks. We'll talk soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check them out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.